All right, today we are diving deep into a huge cybercrime bust out of Argentina. And look, this is way more than just a story about some hackers. We're talking about a sophisticated criminal network that was blurring the lines between the digital world and, well, the real-life underworld. It's a wild story, so let's jump right in. So here's how we're going to break this down. We're going to kick things off with the big finale, the dramatic raid that took this group down. Then we'll hit rewind and see the one tiny digital clue that started this whole thing. After that, we'll get a look inside the criminal group itself, see how the cops finally caught them, and this is the important part. We'll talk about why this case is a pretty scary preview of where organized crime is headed. Okay, so like I said, we're starting at the end of the story. Picture this. A huge, perfectly coordinated police operation hitting multiple spots all at once across the country. This really shows you just how big of a threat the authorities thought these guys were. We're talking about 22 simultaneous raids. That's not a small number. The federal police in Argentina went all out on this one on October 16th. And yeah, this was definitely not some local, small-time bust. The raids happened across 4 different provinces. That just goes to show you how widespread this criminal network really was. And what was the result of all that action? 11 key suspects in cuffs. I'm talking the very core of this whole organization. So you've got to be asking, how in the world did the police manage to take down a group this big and this smart? Well, it all kicked off with one tiny little clue. Okay, so let's hit the rewind button. You'd think a 7-month-long investigation like this must have started with some massive headline-grabbing data breach, right? Nope. It actually started with a simple little automated tool that was being sold online. So back on March 10th, investigators with a special unit, they call it DICO, they spotted something weird on a messaging app. Someone was selling a bot, an automated program, and it didn't look right at all. This little tool was called Sherlock Alerts. And trust me, this was not just some simple bot. This thing was powerful. It was designed to dive into hacked government and private databases and pull out super sensitive personal info instantly. Think of it like a subscription service for stolen data. Yeah, data theft is a service. And the crazy part is how easy it was to use. All you had to do was send the bot a keyword, like someone's national ID number. In Argentina, that's the DNI. The bot would then just go to work, searching all these stolen databases. And boom, seconds later, it sends you back a whole file of that person's private info. It was just terrifyingly efficient. So a tool this powerful? You know it's not the work of some lone hacker in a basement, right? No way. This was the product of a really well-organized criminal group. So the question becomes, who were these people behind Sherlock Alerts? Well, the investigators pretty quickly figured out that the group behind all this called themselves Dictadores, which, yeah, that means the dictators. They even zeroed in on the guy who actually built the Sherlock bot, a guy using the name Trinix, and the group's founder. These guys were smart, though, constantly changing their online names to try and stay one step ahead of the law. And when I say they were organized, I mean it. They were basically running this thing like a shady tech startup. They had clear roles. You had your admins and leaders running the show. You had the developers building and selling the products. And then you had technical operators who were experts in different kinds of cybercrime. They even had collaborators they'd bring in to share info and organize group hacking sprees. And the list of crimes they were committing, it's just insane. I mean, you've got the stuff you might expect, like phishing scams and stealing credit card numbers. But it got way darker. We're talking about financially grooming minors, creating fake medical prescriptions, even breaking into official records and changing them. But here's something the investigators said they'd never seen before in Argentina. This group had a really nasty tactic. They would target low-income, vulnerable people and offer them a little bit of cash to open up digital accounts in their own names. Then the criminals would take over those accounts and use them for all their illegal business, just completely exploiting people. And that brings us right back to where we started. The big finale. After months and months of digging and digital detective work, the authorities finally had everything they needed to bring this whole house of cards down. Just look at the timeline here. It really shows you how patient the cops had to be. It all starts with that one bot being spotted back in March. Then, for the next 7 months, the federal police are just meticulously gathering evidence, mapping out the whole group, identifying who's who. And it all leads up to that one big day, October 16th, the takedown. And when they did those raids, wow, they found out exactly what these digital crimes were paying for in the real world. I'm talking huge piles of cash, US dollars, euros, you name it. High-end cars, tons of cell phones and computers, obviously. Bank cards, documents. Oh, and they also found over 2 kilos of marijuana, which is a pretty big clue that their criminal world wasn't just online. Okay, so you might be thinking, all right, another cybercrime group got taken down. What's the big deal? But this case is so much more than that. The reason it matters is because it points to this really, really disturbing trend, the merging of high-tech cybercrime with, old-school violent organized crime. And this is the part that should really give you pause. The investigators found direct links between the Dictadores and actual drug trafficking organizations in the city of Rosario. Think about that. These hackers were acting as the tech support for drug cartels. They were feeding them data for extortion, for surveillance, for laundering their money. It's a whole new level of dangerous. This whole case is basically a playbook for what a modern criminal organization looks like. First, they turned data into a weapon. Stolen personal info wasn't just sold, it was used for real-world threats and fraud. Second, they preyed on the weakest people in society, kids, the poor. And third, they had this whole crime as a service model. They were selling their tools and skills, which just makes it so much easier for traditional gangs and cartels to get into the cybercrime game. Look, taking down the Dictadores was a huge win, no doubt about it. But it's also a wake-up call. The whole game has changed. When your digital criminals are arming violent cartels with information and tools, that line between an online threat and a physical one it evaporates. It really makes you stop and think, right? If crime has gone fully digital, where do we even fight it anymore? What's the new front line?